Today, in this video, I'm going to talk to someone who's been around a lot of table saws about my new table saw and how to use it safely. Hello everybody and welcome to reaDIYsteaDIY. Exciting day today. I just bought my first table saw. I'm excited to get going with it, but I also know and am aware that over 30,000 people every year in America alone end up in the emergency room because of their table saw. I wanted to learn how to use the table saw safely, so I called Jason Barnes. He's a partner at Alair Homes, which is in Aurora, Ontario, Canada. He's a guy who's been around a lot of table saws, and I asked him, before I open up the box, do you have any advice for me?
Probably in our industry, one of the most, not to intimidate you, but one of the most dangerous tools that we use are table saws. But if you do the right precautions and you use them properly, which all too often we see guys not doing, they're actually a really safe tool and a very useful one. So one of the most important things I'd say, especially if you're new to a table saw, is always ensuring that it's on a level surface. In fact, you'll see most of them have holes on them that you can fasten the table saw, whether it be to a proper table saw like table or sawhorse, or if you have a table that you can screw it down to. That is very critical, I believe. And then it's really about making sure. You'll see a lot of people taking off guards and stuff like that, which just really increases the risk. So you want to make sure you're using those guards. They're there for a reason. And one of the things I also see as people use them more and more is they get the tendency not to use the push through rods that come with the table saws. I always think keep your hands away from the blade. The greatest fear and where most accidents happen a lot of times on table saws is as you're pushing something through, if for any reason it starts to tilt to one side or it hits a knot in the wood, it can have the tendency to kick back. So most injuries on table saws will happen with that. Actually, is as you're pushing it through, it can kick back, and when that happens, it can your hand can get too close for comfort. So that's where those push through rods can really help and keep your hands away, just in case that was to ever happen. Most saws now, one thing they have put into their saws that I really like is anti-kick mechanisms in them that really, again, because most injuries happen when it kicks back. So I know the saw that I have and use still to date has that, and I've noticed I've had no issues with it kicking back. Now, having said that, because of that, I would never start pushing things through with my hands or getting too close to the blade just because it has that. You still want to make sure you're using those push rods and everything just to keep your hands away.
I was curious if Jason had ever had an accident himself with a table saw or if he'd ever seen one, and I wondered if he could tell me anything about that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's funny you mentioned about a table saw. I was standing, working with one of my colleagues. It was about 10 years ago, and he was ripping a piece of wood. I was screwing some stuff together and kind of turned around watching him. And again, he had taken his eyes off the saw for 1 second and sliced the top half of his finger off. And it literally, you cannot describe how fast it happens with these power tools. It's just 1 second, you're not paying attention, and then his finger was gone. But whenever you're using a table saw, you want to make sure when you adjust the height of the blade that it is literally just above the depth that you're cutting. I see a lot of guys, they just crank that blade all the way up so that it'll pretty well cut anything they want. But again, the more of that blade that's exposed above the piece that you're cutting, the more chance of risk. So one of the things we teach our guys all the time is, check the depth, line it up with the piece of wood that you're cutting, and have it so that the blade is literally just cutting on the top of the surface there. And don't have the blade up too high. So that was part of what happened with him, is he just had the blade cranked right up and he was pushing it through and kind of just looked over to the side for 1 second and it kicked and sliced off the top of his finger. I always say any tool you use is only as safe as the operator using it, right? So the main thing with any power tool is you need your full attention. You can't be distracted. You just need to be, they're all designed with the proper safety mechanisms, and they're all very useful tools and safe to use as long as you're respecting what you're doing and giving it the full attention that it deserves and not distracted, not overly tired. Again, most of the injuries that I have ever seen, which isn't many, but the ones that I have been just sheer distraction or just really not paying attention to what they were doing. I couldn't imagine being in construction without a table saw. What the abilities that you have with a table saw that you could never do with a track saw or circular saw are unbelievable. So there's a place for every tool, and again, it's just really about respecting the tool and paying attention to what you're doing. If I was to summarize 3 important points for when using a table saw, number 1 would be make sure it's on a level surface, you're on a level surface, and it's properly supported. Number 2 would be to adjust the blade height so that it's just cutting just above the thickness of what you're cutting. And number 3 would be always use push rods. Never get your hands. I know everybody's tempted to do it because maybe the push rod isn't around at that time, but there's really no way you can cut your finger off if your hand is nowhere near the blade.
Thanks very much to Jason Barnes of Alair Homes. I hope you found some value in this video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And if you don't do that, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. I'm always trying to make the channel better, and your feedback helps.